Howdy, my totally tubular gamers. We're back with another man, I'm going back in. We'll get to it.
So today I got another list for you. We're going to be talking about games that I just couldn't get into at first. Do you ever have a game where you try it for an hour or two, maybe even a few, and you're like, man, I'm really struggling to get into this, and then you eventually drop it, only to then come back a number of months, maybe even years later and go, wait, this is actually really great, and then you actually play through the entire game? Well, that's really what I'm going to be talking about today. Games I just couldn't get into at first. Until I did. So with that in mind, I do want to emphasize that I did actually beat all of these games. I came back and eventually beat them at some point, but initially, yeah, they were games that I had dropped. And so I would love to know, what are some games you dropped that you ended up coming back to, or maybe games that you one day hope to come back to? Genuinely, I would love to know. Let's get a discussion going down below. So with that, this intro doesn't need to go on any longer. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Please hype the video, whatever the fuck that means. I also got the Patreon. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so very much. Before we begin though, I do want to give a shout out to today's sponsor. So today's video is sponsored by a game that I sure do want to come back to, that being Tempo Punk. So what is Tempo Punk? Well, Tempo Punk is an upcoming high-octane FPS where the music truly is your weapon. In this FPS, your power is truly tied to the tempo. Shooting, dashing, and reloading in sync with the intense electronic score unleashes all this devastating damage, and it actually keeps you alive. It's different from other rhythm-based action games, and the demo actually feels incredible. It's also got handcrafted levels, seeing you face off against these colossal biomechanical bosses in this heart-pounding experience. If you're someone who loves FPS games and is looking for something different, this very much might be up your alley. The game is currently set for PC on Steam, where you can actually play a demo that's out right now, so if what you see looks cool, you can go check it out. There's even this community event going on called Pulse Red. The devs will even be adding high-scoring player names into the levels of the finished game. You can also wishlist the game, which really does help out the developers. All in all, this seems like a really cool upcoming FPS that I for sure will be returning to, as I legit did have a lot of fun with it. Thank you Tempo Punk for sponsoring the video. Now, on to the rest of the video. Now to start things off, oh boy, we got a good one with Sekiro. Now I want to clarify, Sekiro is a fantastic game. It's one of the best games From Software has ever made, and it has some of the best 3D action combat you will find of any video game. But man, the first time I ever tried Sekiro, I bounced off it pretty hard. I got it when it came out, and I played like 5 or 6 hours, and I remember just thinking to myself, man, I am just not picking up what this game is putting down. I had just gotten off of Dark Souls 3 and booted up Sekiro, and I remember immediately having issues with the direction they took for this game. I remember thinking to myself, wow, I really have to use the sword and I have to just counter and parry. And that's the only way I can play this game. There's only one playstyle. See, in Dark Souls, there's numerous different ways to play the game, depending on your weapon, depending on your build. You might want to focus on magic or shields, or really a variety of different weapons. There's a number of different strategies to approach the game. In Sekiro, it is strictly use the sword, counter and parry everything, and if you don't adapt, you're not going to get anywhere in the game. And then the game is also punishingly difficult. So yeah, I wasn't smelling whatever this game was cooking. I also wasn't digging the story, and the boss fights, while they seemed cool, nothing was wowing me, and I bounced off it. However, a few years later, I returned to Sekiro and went, this game is fucking amazing. I don't know what I was thinking before. I don't care that the game forces you to one playstyle. That one playstyle is absolutely amazing. And I remember pretty much dropping everything else I was playing at the time just to play through this game. I was having such a great time with it. I love the combat. The boss fights were wowing me, in the story, while it didn't grab me at first, it does get pretty interesting later. Despite the game's high difficulty, I was able to get through it, and yeah, it's one of my favorite games from the 2010s, and genuinely, I feel so silly that I wasn't able to get into this one at first. And it was for such a nonsensical reason, like, yeah, this game is by From Software, but it's not Dark Souls. It's not much of an RPG at all. I don't know why I expected it to be like that. Well, at least I didn't go into Armored Core saying this isn't like Dark Souls. Either way, I'm really glad that I came back to Sekiro. It's a great one. So here we got another one where I'm just shaking my head with Red Dead Redemption 1. I played this game shortly after it released, and I remember trying it for maybe an hour or two, and just being not all that impressed with it. I had heard all around that this game was absolutely incredible, and while I do think Red Dead Redemption 1 is incredible, I'll be the first to admit that the intro isn't the strongest, especially when it comes to Rockstar video games. And I remember within that first hour or two, you're just on the farm, you're doing some basic stuff, you don't really get into a lot of gunfights, they're still easing you into things and just going, yeah, this isn't all that exciting, I don't see all the hype. And then I remember actually just hopping on the multiplayer and having a lot more fun with that. I remember even trying Undead Nightmare shortly after and going, yeah, this is pretty awesome, this is way better than the main game. And it wasn't until like the late 2010s when I finally sat the fuck down and played through the entire game, and I just went, yeah, this game's absolutely incredible. All those people were right. Outside of just being immature, I really have no idea why I dropped this game, why I thought it was boring. Yeah, the first hour or two isn't wildly exciting, but the game quickly ramps things up and does become wildly exciting. Get it? Wildly? Because, you know, the Wild Wild West. Oh, I'm so funny.
Shut up, bitch!
So yeah, long story short, I think I was just too immature or too impatient to get to the really good stuff of Red Dead Redemption 1, so I dropped it, eventually came back and found out just like everybody else that it's a pretty incredible game. I also see why I loved Undead Nightmare. I don't think Undead Nightmare is better than the original game, but it has some pretty excellent pacing, and it does throw you into the thick of things real quick. What's even funnier to think about is that if my younger self thought that the intro to Red Dead Redemption 1 was too long or tedious or whatever I thought, I can't imagine how I would react to Red Dead Redemption 2, where the intro is like 4 times as long. But that's a discussion neither here nor there. I've grown up, I've matured since then, and I see the amazing game that is Red Dead Redemption. Well, turns out I've dropped a lot of good games at some point. Here we have God of War 2018. Now, I played God of War 2018 when it came out, and I remember only playing like 4 or 5 hours of it before I gave the game the boot and moved on to something else. Now, as a teenager, I love the God of War series. I played God of War 1, 2, and 3 quite a bit actually. And they're some of my favorite games from those eras. I love the combat, the spectacles, the gore, and the story was pretty sick also. I didn't really know anything about God of War 2018 going into it. I just went, it's the new God of War, it's gonna be like the other ones, right? And I booted it up and I was just kind of perplexed by the whole thing. I was like, this isn't anything like the other God of Wars. This feels more like Last of Us than anything else. While I thought the story was actually really interesting and I did enjoy Kratos and Atreus' bond, I wasn't really clicking with anything else here. The combat was not doing it for me. It felt so scaled back from the previous games. Like, yeah, it felt good to use the axe and throw it, but it seemed like that was the only weapon the entire game, and the combat just didn't have the depth or complexity that the other games had. The enemy roster was kind of a joke. There's only a few enemies in the game. And then the game's sense of scale or spectacle just felt really watered down from the previous game, and anytime something massive was happened, it was just in a cutscene, like when the giant serpent shows up. In God of War 3, you got to participate in those spectacles. Here, it just felt like I was watching them. It felt more like a movie than anything else, and that's why after like 4 or 5 hours, I just said, man, this doesn't really feel like God of War at all, and I actually dropped it and moved on. And I know for a fact that there are plenty of people who feel the same way I did about this game. However, as life goes on, I eventually got a job at PlayStation for the PlayStation Visual Arts and Service Group, and the title that they were working with was God of War Ragnarok, and so I deemed it necessary to go back and play through the entire game, so that I would have a better overall understanding of where we were in development, how it links back to the prior game, etc., etc. And I played through the entire game, and while I still do have some reservations about it, I can say that the game is very good. From a production standpoint, the game is absolutely incredible. Nobody's ever denying that. When it comes to the story, the writing, the characters, it is phenomenal. I still have my gripes about the game's combat, the lacking enemy roster, the kind of basic combat, and the game's sense of scale are fair critiques, but the game has so much good going for it, and I would say that it's one of the better God of War games overall. While I still do prefer God of War 3 and I have a lot of love for that, I still think this game is cool too. Eventually, you know, my team, really all the teams, would finish God of War Ragnarok, the game would come out, and I think that game is fantastic. They actually really addressed my issues with the 2018 game. But that's neither here nor there. One day I'll rank all of the God of War games, but that's how I really got back into this game. It was needed for work. The most exciting possible answer. So here's another fun one with Final Fantasy 15. Now, like many other games I've described today, I was very excited for this one. I got it when it released, and I remember actually playing a fair amount of this game. I remember actually getting pretty far in this game to the point where you leave the big open world. Yeah, I got to the second half of the game where everything becomes a lot more linear, and I remember just being so turned off by the second half of this game that I actually ended up dropping the game. If you're unfamiliar with Final Fantasy 15, the first half of the game has you in this pretty large open world well, where you're driving around in this car known as the Regalia, and there's tons of awesome side content and even some really cool hunts. But once you get to the second half, the game becomes incredibly linear. It's just set piece to set piece, and it has you running down literal corridors in a straight line. It's just fight after fight after fight, and the story takes a pretty drastic turn as well for reasons that I won't spoil. And yeah, simply put, I wasn't fucking with it. I was not enjoying this and just went, man, this is like a completely different game and I don't really want to continue it. And yeah, that was pretty much it. It wasn't until many years later that I got the game on PC and said, you know what, I'm actually going to sit all the way through it this time. Had a great time in the first half again, but then the second half, I was dreading it, and yeah, it's nowhere near as good as the first half. There were a number of updates to make it more manageable, to make it better and a little bit more like the first half, but it's still not great. Final Fantasy 15 is like the textbook example of a game that peaks early, where it's a really great time at the beginning and it just kind of fizzles out by the end, outside of the ending, which is actually really good. Overall, I'm glad that I eventually went back and played through this one, but my initial feelings about that second half were pretty accurate, I would say. Despite that, I would still recommend the game. I would just give a huge asterisk that yeah, once you get to the linear parts, the quality does take a bit of a nosedive. So here's another fun one with Fallout 3. Now, the first time that I ever tried Fallout 3 was in the late 2000s, and this was the first Bethesda RPG I had ever played, and I really didn't know what to expect. I was just trying it because a bunch of kids on the playground said it was the greatest thing ever made, and shrimply put, I was just too young to truly understand what this game was all about. I really didn't understand how an open world RPG worked, and I really just wasn't comprehending this game's systems and mechanics. I only played a few hours of it and eventually gave it back to my friend, since I actually was borrowing it, and he was super disappointed that I didn't care for it, and I was like, dude, I just want to go back to Gears of War. I understand that one just fine. Yeah, Kid Jonathan, he wasn't exactly the brightest. Obviously, I went back to Fallout 3 again and again and again, and I can say that it's one of the best open world RPGs ever made. I mean, it's Fallout 3. It's a pretty awesome game. I wish I had more to say about this, but it was just one of those instances where I just wasn't ready for this type of game. I wasn't in the right mindset. I hadn't played any other game like this, and once I got a bit wiser, a bit smarter, and a bit more mature, I understood the error in my ways. But nowadays, I just look back and laugh. I mean, that's all I can really do about it. I love the game now, and that's all that matters. I'm really gonna upset someone with these. Here we have Undertale. Now, the first time I ever played Undertale was like right when the game came out. A bunch of my friends were hyping it up. They were like, oh, this is an amazing RPG. You absolutely have to play this game at all costs. So yeah, I went and bought it and played like an hour or two of it and went, really? You're saying this is one of the most amazing games ever? Like, really? Are we playing the same game? I remember thinking to myself, yeah, the music is cool, the art is charming, I guess, but like nothing's happening here. It feels really low stakes and basic, and it feels almost like a slice of life anime than some big epic RPG people are hyping up. Like, yeah, I thought the characters were kind of charming and cute, but like it felt like the game's pacing was an absolute crawl. It took forever for anything to happen, and I just wasn't all that interested. I was going, man, this is starting to get pretty dull. And I wasn't in love with the combat either. I would go on to listen to the entire Undertale soundtrack, but actually play through the entire thing? Yeah, it didn't happen for a long time. Fast forward a number of years and Deltarune episode 1 and 2 was released, and I went, okay, it's time to go back to Undertale and actually give it a fair shot. And yeah, I gave it a fair shot, and I think it's one of the greatest indie games ever made. The pacing is very slow. The game absolutely takes its time with everything, and it feels pretty low stakes at first, and it takes a while for the combat to become all that enjoyable, but I think the game really grows on you, and it's one of those games where I think the more you play it, the better it gets, and there really is like nothing else like it. Obviously it was inspired by a number of games, but no other game has ever been able to come together like Undertale, except maybe Deltarune. I've only played episode 1 and 2 of Deltarune. I really got to get around to 3 and 4, but I sure would love to at some point. There's just way too many games. But anyway, I'm glad that I played Undertale. It's such a lovely game, and it's so charming and cute, and again, that music, it's so good. The music alone makes this game worth playing. So here's one that I just don't really have that good of a reason for, with Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Now, I got this game when it came out because I was a fan of Monolith Software. I love the Fear series and some of their older games like Blood and No One Lives Forever. I also quite enjoy Lord of the Rings. I haven't seen a ton of movies, but I actually have seen Lord of the Rings, and I think it's pretty sick, and I thought this game looked really cool. I remember getting it when it came out. I played like 6 or 7 hours of it and just ended up dropping it. Why? I don't really remember why, to be honest. I remember having fun with it. I remember thinking the Nemesis system was cool, and I remember enjoying the combat, but I just remember at some point going, I'm just not really feeling it, and ended up dropping the game. It was just one of those cases where I guess I just wasn't in the mood for it. I guess something else came out that I was more interested in, and the game shrimply fell by the wayside. And I wouldn't actually return to this one for many years. It would be quite some time before I came back to Shadow of Mordor. Funny enough, despite that, I would get the sequel, Shadow of War, and I actually played through the entire game despite it being way bigger, and I really enjoyed it. And then in 2023, I remember I wanted to make a video about all the modern Lord of the Rings games for the upcoming highly anticipated Lord of the Rings Gollum, and said, I think this is a great opportunity to actually play through the entire game. So I sat down, played through the entire game, and beat it in about 5 or 6 hours, and I went, why didn't I finish this the first time before? Because the game is actually pretty solid. I like that it's a bit more focused. I like that they throw you right into it. There isn't a bunch of tutorials. It doesn't take hours upon hours to really get into the thick of it. No, you're in there real quick. Yeah, the story sucks, but the story isn't the focal point. Killing all of the orcs is. I'm just not too sure why I dropped it that first time, but I'm glad I finished the game since, because it is genuinely one of the best Lord of the Rings games of the last 10 years. I still prefer Shadow of War, but this one is pretty cool. And so here we have Crysis 2, which I feel like I actually have a pretty good reason for dropping. Now, before Crysis 2 came out, I actually did play through Crysis 1. I had just gotten a new computer, and naturally I got Crysis, and it also had Crysis Warhead. And so I played through both of them, and I absolutely love them. I love the suit and the abilities, I love the levels and how open everything is. I really genuinely enjoy both of these games a lot. And so when Crysis 2 came out, I was pretty excited. I got it and felt disappointed almost immediately. I just didn't like the direction that this game took at all, and after like 2 or 3 hours I just said, I'm done. This is nothing like Crysis 1 or its really cool standalone expansion that seems to be forgotten about. Let me explain. Crysis 2 is a linear, compact game when compared to the first one. The first one had these big, sprawling open areas that you could explore, and you could do objectives out of order, and you could do them in a number of different ways. Crysis 2 isn't really like that. It is, but not to the same extent. The game is a lot more compact, it has tighter level design, it's a lot more linear, there's more corridors, areas are significantly smaller, and that sense of exploration is just not here at all. There's no nooks and crannies, and everything is very straightforward. And when it comes to the suit, it's pretty much the same thing. In the original, you had a number of different suit functions. Here, it's a lot more streamlined. There's only 3. And it's just a lot simpler, straight up. The game also takes place in the city as opposed to the jungles of the first game, and I just didn't love all of these changes. I didn't like that it was more linear. I didn't like the simplified suit. I didn't like the city. It just felt so streamlined and watered down from the original in so many ways that, yeah, I dropped it. A few years later, I would come back to it, and while I still do have a number of reservations about Crysis 2, and I do think that it is a step down from the original and its expansion, I still think the game is pretty decent. It still has a number of good things going for it, and there's plenty of enjoyment to be had here, but I can totally understand why younger me just dropped it and wasn't interested. I wanted it to be more like the first game, and it really wasn't. Crysis 3 I think is a pretty good middle ground, where the suit is less simplified, the areas are quite a bit bigger than what shows up in Crysis 2, and it just felt more in line with the first game. I still think there is no bad Crysis game, but I certainly would not have Crysis 2 at the top of my Crysis ranking, and yes, I did do a Crysis ranking many years ago. I would like to do a new one, but I'm gonna wait for Crysis 4 to come out. I'm sure I upset the Crysis community somehow here. At least my PC could run Crysis. Aw yeah. And so our next game's another interesting one with Sunset Overdrive. Now, I got this one pretty close to release. I actually used to play on my Xbox One quite a bit, and I was excited for this one. It was by Insomniac Games, who I would eventually have a very deep connection with, and it looked like Jet Set Radio meets Guns. How could I not like that? I love Guns and Jet Set Radio. And I remember playing 4 or 5 hours of it, and I thought it was actually pretty fun. The guns felt good, the grinding felt nice, and it had a good vibe to it. So why did I stop playing it? I'm not exactly too sure, but I just remember one day going, man, I don't really feel like playing this, and I ended up just dropping the game. I guess I just wasn't in the mood for it. But a few years later I would get the game on Steam and would eventually play through the entire thing, and I can tell you that it is a pretty solid game. There's a lot of good stuff for it, and I can totally see why a number of people want a sequel for it, as unlikely as that may be. The game actually is a whole lot of fun. The grinding really does feel nice, and there's a bunch of unique weapons, and getting to see them in real life at the Insomniac office was actually pretty cool. And it just makes me glad that I actually did play through this entire game so that I knew what the hell these weapons were and how everything functioned, and I could actually speak on the game with some knowledge. But I played through it before I even started with Sony, so all of that is rather unrelated. Either way, Sunset Overdrive is a pretty good one that I dropped for seemingly no good reason, but I'm glad I went back and played through it because it's actually pretty good, and it's underrated these days. So here's one I talked about not that long ago with Borderlands 1, and you might be going, Borderlands? You really dropped this one? Oh yeah, I dropped Borderlands like a bag of shit the first time I played it. I was playing by myself, nobody wanted to get the game, and I played maybe 8 or 9 hours of it, and I just went, man, this game is cool, but it's just kind of dull. Like, the pacing is really slow, the quests are terrible. The world is just kind of unexciting, and the RPG elements feel rather weak, and yeah, I dropped it like that. And I actually wouldn't return to the game anytime soon. Borderlands 2 came out, I got that and absolutely loved it, have played through that multiple times. Pre-sequel came out and I played through that. Even Borderlands 3 came out, and I played through that. It wasn't until the early 2020s when I finally sat back down and played through the entirety of Borderlands 1 with a friend, then I was able to finally see the entirety of the game. And yeah, I think Borderlands 1 is pretty good. I also think really almost any other Borderlands game is better than the original, but that also is a good thing. That means the series has just been getting better and better, and the quality just keeps getting higher and higher. But I know there's a number of people that will disagree with me about that. It doesn't really seem to matter what I say about Borderlands, people are going to disagree. Borderlands 1, yeah, the beginning isn't the most exciting, the pacing is rather slow, and it's not as bombastic as really any of the other games in the series, but I still think it's good, and it's nice to see where the series came from. And I'm glad that I eventually, 10 plus years later, played through Borderlands 1. And then the DLC was there, and I was like, you know, that's just not going to happen. Maybe in another 10 years I'll try the DLC. I know a number of people told me about the Claptrap DLC and General Knox and all that, but you know what? I think I've had enough of Borderlands 1. I'm going back to 4. I genuinely really enjoy it. So here's one that might really surprise some people, and that is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Now, I remember the first time I played Twilight of Princess, I thought it looked absolutely incredible. I was playing it on my newfangled Wii, and I was using the motion controls, and it was super cool. But then, after even a few hours of play, I just realized that the game wasn't clicking with me, and I just wasn't having a great time with it. I'm not entirely sure what the reason was. It was almost 20 years ago now. I think it was the pacing, the slow nature of the beginning of Twilight of Princess, and just the overall vibes. It just wasn't gravitating towards me. I wanted it to be more like Wind Waker. I know I'm in the minority there, but that is what I wanted at the time. It wasn't until like 10 plus years later that I sat back down and played through Twilight of Princess, and you know what? The game is fantastic. Really, every 3D Zelda is pretty damn good, but I think Twilight of Princess is a really solid one as well. Yeah, the beginning is pretty slow, and it probably is what turned me off from it when I was younger, but nowadays, I can kind of appreciate the slower pace. It can feel like a bit of a slog at times, but it really does set up the overall world of Twilight Princess. And I can really see what they were going for here. Is it my absolute favorite Zelda? No, it's not. I still do prefer Wind Waker over this, but I really do like this game, and part of me feels a little silly for dropping it, especially when it was so new and the Wii in general was so new. Like, it probably would have been super hype if I got to some of the later dungeons or fights, but nope. I zoned the fuck out, dropped it, and said, see ya later, I'm gonna go play more Wii Sports or Super Mario Galaxy or whatever the hell I was playing on the Wii in the mid-2000s. Alright, and the last game we have here is a pretty easy one. This is low-hanging fruit, honestly, with Cyberpunk 2077. I mean, it's pretty obvious why. I feel like this game is in almost every single one of my fucking lists at this point, but I just have so much to say about it. I mean, I got it when it came out, and the game was a flaming pile of shit. I played maybe 10 or so hours of it and just finally gave up and said the game sucks, and it is not at all what I wanted, and so I got rid of the game, and then I got it many years later for PS5 and went, yeah, the game's absolutely fantastic, and it's genuinely one of the best RPGs of the 2020s. It took a while to get here, way longer than it should have, but here we are. I don't think I'm alone in that story that I just shared. I think there are a number of people where that exact same situation happened, and you know, I'm glad that the game was good eventually. I will never let CD Projekt Red live this down. I much would have rather just seen the game get delayed like a year than the crap we got when it released. That's why delays don't really bother me. I'd rather the game just be good at launch than waiting a year or two. Either way, I played through it, really do enjoy it, and the expansion's pretty awesome as well. Alright though, that's it for today's video. Thank you so very much for watching. I really appreciate you. If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment our code word. It's going to be Frosty. Don't ever order a Frosty from Wendy's. I just know from experience. So with that, yeah, everybody have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.